to our cultures, nature is everything for us. For example, we are easily able to connect with our ancestors through nature. When we want to talk to our ancestors, the best place where we go is in the bush. And our cultural belief is that when we are in the bush and you are alone, if you are not alone, you have to be with the elders. You are able to talk to them and they will be able to listen to you and deliver what you are asking from them.
I'm Jessica Smith.
And I'm Diana Denke.
And this is Executives in the Wild, a podcast that interviews remarkable leaders and changemakers to understand why being connected to nature is so crucial to their happiness and professional success, and how it's helping them to make a positive difference in this world.
We want to showcase inspiring guests who have successfully integrated a connection to nature into their lives. We want to give our listeners a beacon of hope that there is a better way to lead in these uncertain times, one we can all lean into if only we dare to step into the wild.
Our guest today is Esther Netshivhongweni from the Makuyu, Cheche, and Tengwe Fundudzi tribes in the northern part of South Africa. She is a highly accomplished academic and professional, holding both honors and master's degrees in commerce. She has earned postgraduate professional management and advanced professional management diplomas and furthered her expertise at the Singapore Institute of Banking and Finance. Currently, Esther is pursuing her PhD studies at the University of Nottingham in the UK. With over 30 years of experience in matters concerning Indigenous peoples, local communities, and nature conservation, Esther has made very many significant contributions to this field. For example, she currently chairs the Communities Advisory Panel for the Biodiversity Credit Alliance, convened by the United Nations. She co-leads the Demand Integrity Working Group on behalf of both the Alliance and the World Economic Forum. Esther is also involved in the International Advisory Panel on Biodiversity Credits, an initiative launched by the heads of state of the UK and France, where she is a member of 2 working groups. Furthermore, she serves as the co-chair of the Southern African Development Community for the Global River Protection Coalition. Previously, Esther was the chairperson for Limpopo Province of People and Parks in South Africa. She now serves as the national chairperson of the Community Conservancies Association. She is a key advisor on nature markets across the continent via the Alliance of Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities for Conservation in Africa and the Community Leaders Network of the Southern Africa region. Currently, Esther is developing an empowerment strategy with communities to address the agenda for local leadership set during a recent conference of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Her unwavering commitment continues to drive meaningful progress in nature conservation and towards the empowerment of Indigenous peoples and local communities across Africa and beyond. What a bio. Welcome, Esther. We're really privileged and honored to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much. I'm also honored and very happy to be with you today.
Great. Well, we'd love to hear a little bit more about yourself and, where did your love and passion for nature start?
Well, as you have already indicated from my bio, when I studied, I was much more interested in following the business route in my career, which I did until I reached the ceiling. My last job, I was an executive in the mining industry. But I realized that for all the career years, I was never been a happy person. Every time when I'm on leave, I cannot go to the sea. I cannot go to the city. The best place for me was to run to the Kruger National Park. And I always wanted to do that alone. And that for me has been coming up with a lot of big questions. I'm alone. I'm driving a Land Cruiser in the bush. And I'm happy. So until 2013, I realized, no, these full-time jobs have to stop now. I love nature too much. I've been in the nature for all these years. I've been assisting communities on a part-time basis. It's time for me now to do it full-time. That's how it started. But I also think that it was from the childhood. The way I grew up much more connecting to nature. And I think that experience gave me an opportunity to always run back to the bush, to always run back to nature when I want to refresh, when I want to make sure that my brain works well.
That's really interesting, Esther, that you describe that journey. It looks like your relationship to nature has evolved over time, and you reconnected to that childhood felt sense of being close to nature. How do you connect to nature today? Do you have any ritual or habit or routine that enables you to regularly connect to nature?
Very interesting question, of course, yes. And I think that spiritual part of connecting with nature is also connecting to my tradition, my culture. So every time when I get frustrated very easy by being in big cities like your Johannesburg, like your London. Immediately when I come back, something always pushed me to be in the bush. I don't know what is that. I will quickly go and rest in the bush, and in most cases I do that alone. I listen to the birds, and very strange. I'm not even scared of the big five when I'm in the bush. So that part I think is more of the spiritual journey, which started long time ago. I don't know how though. Maybe it's inborn, because in our clan name we are the elephants. So every time when there are bad news in our cultural beliefs, we know that it will start with your dreams. You will always see these elephants coming. But the way of managing it for me is to run back to the bush, rest there, watch those elephants, and I believe we understand very well when it comes to connecting with elephants. People say elephants are dangerous, but we see them as very peaceful animals. We see them as animals that always bring lucky and blessings to us and also our ancestors.
I can definitely resonate to that. I spent 3 weeks in my early 20s working in an elephant nature park in Thailand, where women set up this park to collect rescued elephants that now they can live relatively freely. And I was amazed by all the social structures and the emotional bonds that they form with each other and how intelligent those animals are. So it certainly resonates. Can you tell us a bit more, Esther, about in the culture you grew up, how did you view nature? What are some of the ways people relate to nature?
Okay, we see nature as everything in our lives in terms of making sure that our livelihoods it's good. We see nature as a source of food. For example, in South Africa today, they call it sustainable utilization of our natural resources. I think it's just that as the culture evolves, as countries do more research, they will come up with all these terms. But it's all about traditional hunting for food. And that's how we grew up. That's how we are still growing up. That's how we're still feeding our families. Even though these days, as you are aware, there are a lot of legal requirements that you have to comply with, which we have to comply, unfortunately. But traditionally, that hunting was more linked on providing food to our families, but it was not only happening every time. There were selected yearly times where hunting was allowed, and after that, we will stop. But also the way we used to hunt, you will realize that if, for example, you are Diana, your clan will be, for example, lion. So you can't eat lion. Like we are elephants, we can't touch elephants. And others will be wildebeest, others will be baboons. So when your clan name is that animal, you don't touch it. And I see that as a powerful way of our ancestors trying to manage and conserve our nature.
Okay, and Esther, are you able to, adapt your work? For example, are you able to take a break over the summer period, or is there anything that you do according to the seasons that, changes the way you relate to work?
Okay, depending on the season, you find that from the Limpopo province, when it's this time of the year, it's very cold. And you find that it's also very difficult for us to be walking in the bush in the early hours of the morning because it's freezing. So some of us love to be in the bush very early in the morning, but unfortunately during winter, you don't want to go there because it will be easy for you to catch flu, for example. So you have to adjust to make sure that you are always indoor.
Esther, it does look like you did spend quite a significant time alone in nature. And those moments can lead to some unexpected insights about our perspective in life, our purpose, our spiritual beliefs. Can you tell us about a time where you had an encounter that really inspired the way you think about life?
Okay, nature for me, like I've already indicated, even for to our cultures, nature is everything for us. For example, we are easily able to connect with our ancestors through nature. When we want to talk to our ancestors, the best place where we go is in the bush. And our cultural belief is that when we're in the bush and you are alone, if you are not alone, you have to be with the elders. You are able to talk to them and they will be able to listen to you and deliver what you are asking from them. And for example, just this weekend, in fact, it was yesterday and Saturday, I was with the elders and we had to go to the bush when they were playing their traditional music, trying to connect to the nature, even though some of those songs, as youngsters like our age, we cannot follow them. But you can hear when you get to the bush that something is just changing in your body. Sometimes you feel that your hair are like going out of your head because of what they are doing in terms of singing, getting into the bush. And those experiences are very nice experiences. But also they make us at our age, even to our kids, to listen to the elders when they say, don't do this to the bush, don't just cut the bush, don't just kill the animals, don't just go to the bush without talking to the ancestors, because something's going to happen to you. And the possibility is that, and we've seen it with a number of people who do not listen, you may disappear in the bush and they will never find you. For example, when you say Esther comes from the Makuya Cheche and the Tengwe tribe of Fundudzi. Fundudzi, I think after this interview, you are free to Google it. Is the lake with a standing water, and this water does not mix with the river water. So when there's something very wrong in our culture, we go to Fundudzi. We believe that when we talk to the ancestors, they are there and they listen to us. And the way they will respond to us, it will be through a traditional song, which will be played immediately after we've spoken to them, after we've left the big lake. And they do that during the night by playing this traditional song. But if you are to go back and listen to that song and try and look who's playing the song, you will never see anyone there. And we believe those are our ancestors and they've responded.
And what do you feel this connection to the ancestors is able to give you and this generation? I think in the Western society, we certainly don't have that connection that much. And there is so much wisdom that is potentially lost. How do you experience this connection is showing up for you in your life?
Okay, thank you very much. I think you are very right. From the Western side, I think they don't have such connection. And when sometimes we try and educate them to say that with the Funduzi lake, you cannot just go there. There are certain rules, traditional rules that you need to comply with. And some of them, because they don't want to listen or they don't want to believe in what we're telling them, so they end up disappearing and we will never find their bodies again. I still remember when we grew up, we were told that the Department of Water Affairs tried by all means to fence off the Fundudzi. They wanted to make it a very special tourism spot. But every time when they do that, the following morning when they go back, they realize that all the fences and all the structures that they were trying to put together have been collapsed during the night, and no one knows who collapsed them. So you can see that our belief to a certain extent may be alive or may be true. So those are some of the experiences that we normally encounter.
And Esther, you're obviously you're connected to your home, but you're also very well known internationally now around the world as a leader in nature. So how does your connection to your home environment and your ancestors in the home environment, how does it influence you as a global leader?
Okay, I think as a global leader, I also learned a lot. For example, with tribes from Latin America, tribes from Amazon, tribes from Kenya, from Namibia, they also have their own cultural beliefs, their way of connecting to their ancestors, their way of respecting nature. But that also inject a lot of maturity from the way I used to think as a South African traditionalist who always connected with nature. For example, there's a concept of commodification of nature. The way they see it, for example, people in Amazon, that's not how South Africans from the cultural perspective see it. But that does not mean that whichever side is wrong or is right. It's because of the cultural beliefs. So for me, I think I've grown up to understand different cultures, different ways of believing to the culture, and different ways of spiritually connecting to the nature.
Can you tell us about a way that you spiritually connect to nature?
Yeah, it's quite difficult to explain. If, for example, there's a person who's going to be involved in an accident, or the person who's going to die, and this person is very close to our royal blood, it may happen that the ancestors will send an animal, and in most cases in our situation, they will send an elephant. It may come through a dream, it may come alive. And sometimes when you say, there was an elephant at this time, did you see it? And some of them will say, no, we did not see it, but you saw it. And when you start explaining to the elders, this is what I saw, and this is how it happened, they'll be able to tell you that possibly there's a recognizable figure who may be passing on. And it won't even take 5 days before the person passed on.
I love this level of connection to something more than is visible to the eye and, to our sensory inputs. I think that kind of sensitivity can really be born from a deep connection to nature.
It's not only about through animals. You go to the bush, you connect to the water, not every water, like I've already indicated to you. Sometimes with us, it's about the lake Fundudzi. You don't just go there, you go there for a reason. And immediately after going there, when you sleep, the ancestors, we believe they will be able to tell you about your blessings, about the bad things that may happen to your family. It's about the water, it's about the plants, it's about the animals.
And Esther, feel free to decline if it's too personal of a question, but is there any time that you came to the lake with a major decision?
The time when I decided to leave formal employment, when I was an executive. And immediately after I resigned, after I took my package, my only defense was to spend time with nature for a year before I started thinking, what is it that I want to do in life? What is it that is going to keep me busy? And that made me to make, I think, a very important decision. And that's where I am today, connecting with nature, still assisting the world to try to understand the value of nature.
You invest a lot of your time, and I know you're doing many voluntary roles in leadership in nature. Are there other ways that you personally invest in nature? Are you doing anything like rewilding or anything else that you are making an investment back into nature?
Oh, yes. The way I believe in investing in nature is through assisting, guiding communities. So where we are with nature positive projects, there's a whole lot of different gaps in different continents. I believe in Africa there are a lot of knowledge gaps in terms of understanding these nature markets. And the only way for us to start investing there, including myself, is to make sure that through community guardianship initiative, the initiative we have started, will help to educate people the value of nature, but also will help communities to understand governance, so that when they start negotiating this nature projects investments with different partners, they'll be able to get value out of it in terms of benefit sharing, but also in terms of continuing to protect nature as custodians of such area where they want to put the project together. So I'm investing this volunteering work. I think slowly it's getting to a stage where I'll be able to start seeing the benefits, but it won't be big benefits. Like I said, I enjoy working with communities. I enjoy empowering communities.
And how do you work with communities? Tell us, describe a little bit more of what we can envision.
Okay, some time back, immediately after I left these executive positions with private companies, I chose to educate, to empower communities on sustainable utilization of their resources. And these projects were happening around the Kruger National Park, around my own community. The time when I was also the chairperson of the Limpopo People and Parks, as you have seen on my profile, I have educated most of the communities in Limpopo. Remember, Limpopo is one province which is very rich in South Africa in terms of conservation. And again, I was doing a lot of volunteering work with this community development. And to a level where sometimes communities will make appointment with me and they want to even come to my house and see me. And it was just going on and I was not making money except getting some donors maybe to help here and there. At some point, I was assisted by UNDP, United Nations Development Program, and they put some funds there to try and educate people in terms of managing the wildlife crime, managing deforestation. And I was very busy there for a period of 2 years, also assisting these communities. The main gap with communities that we are currently experiencing is governance. Even though they understand culturally, traditionally, some of the communities are very educated in terms of understanding how to manage their own nature assets. But the challenge that we have today with them is to understand good governance. And that's the reason why I decided the best way will be to come up with community guardianship initiative, a tool which will assist them to train local guardians, and these local guardians will be trained on the local policies, will be trained on understanding the nature contracts, negotiating with their partners. And if we can pass that part, then we'll have powerful communities who will be able to survive from their own nature assets.
That's very clear. I'm wondering how you were talking about in your earlier life stage as a busy executive, you just felt the need to go to nature and create a break and get into your car and drive up to a national park to be alone. How does it changed? How has it changed today? And how do you balance the demands of your career with the need for that quiet, reflective time in nature?
Okay, spending time in nature, it comes spiritually. It's not something that you will just connect it to your career. I've given you an example. Let's say, for example, I spent some time in Davos in London doing these boardroom presentations. So when I come back, spiritually, I will feel that I need to connect with nature. And fortunately or unfortunately, the way you want to put it, you go to nature You just make sure you are not working. You are just communicating with trees, with plants, with animals, elephants, and all of them.
I very much echo that.
For example, I once had a very, very interesting experience last year in the Kruger National Park. So I saw that there was a long queue of people, but I could not see what they were running away from, why they could not move on the road. So I took chance and I just drove until I was closer to the first three cars that were in front. And I realized they could not pass because the elephants were standing in front of them. Then I asked those 2, 3 cars to say, can you please reverse? I want to pass. And they were looking at me like, are you crazy? How are you going to do this? Then they reversed a bit, trying to give me away. And I went closer to the elephant. I know how elephants behave. I went closer to the elephant. I switched off my bakkie. And then the elephant decided to move out of the road and go back to the other side of the road. And there I passed. But those other people, when they try to follow me, then the elephant comes back. Because all what animals want to see is respect.
And you knew how to show it respect.
Correct.
That's something we should all learn very, very fast. I'm also wondering, Esther, how the time that you're spending in nature or that connection that you have been developing is impacting how you think about the future. Has it filled you with more hope and optimism, or rather despair, seeing the degradation? And where do you see our relationship as humans with nature will evolve over time?
I believe as humans who are not responsible enough. For example, if I happen to buy a stand, whether it's in town, whether it's in city or rural, every time I try and be an example of a person who does not want to cut the trees. But most of the people, when they buy a piece of ground, they want to cut all the trees so that they are able to get a space to build their houses, and which is wrong. The people that I interact with, they know very well, even my son, even my daughter, they know very well that we don't cut trees. Before we cut a tree, even in our stand, we must have a discussion and agree. Why is it important to cut this tree? What are we doing? But with the current youngsters, I believe that we are not doing enough in terms of educating them to respect these plants, to respect these animals, to even understand that when a tree is standing, it took that tree many, many years to be at the age where it is. We need that education to our people, to our youngsters.
And Esther, what do you see as the best, vision for the future? What's the best case scenario of a future where we have, harmony with nature in your part of South Africa? What does that look like?
In South Africa, you have different areas where, when you look at them, you believe that there's still future when it comes to protecting your biodiversity. There are areas where I believe that it's going to take some many, many years for us to get to where the conservation was. For example, in cities, I think the construction people, no one really is putting enough monitoring for them to comply before they build. If you look at the way Johannesburg is, and you are to compare it with, for example, Nairobi, but somebody tells me that no, Nairobi is one of those oldest African cities. But still, the way we continue to build, we are not respecting how we cut our trees. We believe in cutting all the trees, build our houses or our malls, and thereafter come and plant this rare special species after we've decided to take off the species that belong to those areas. And that, to our youngsters, they will not know some of the indigenous trees that were there in those areas, which is a challenging one. So in rural areas, we're still trying, but the moment when you have the mining or a big energy project, you know that you are going to lose a lot. And I don't believe that our policies are protective enough to a stage where these big projects are really saving our nature.
So, Esther, when we think about all of these large infrastructure projects, the mining projects that you mentioned in rural areas, do you see job opportunities and financial opportunities from biodiversity offsets? Do you see other job creation opportunities in rural areas from nature in South Africa as well?
Yes, biodiversity offsets. I know that at international level, when we look at biodiversity offsets, it's against good governance practices because it's being seen as if it's encouraging those big companies to do what they've been doing in terms of biodiversity loss. But once biodiversity is lost, we just have to come up with a solution of how are we going to make sure that it's replaced. And that's how we see biodiversity offsets being very productive to both nature and also to protect the livelihoods of our communities. Because those companies, when they put down money for improving that biodiversity loss, it means that communities will be able to benefit. But on the other hand, nature will also be improving. So there's a lot of opportunities there. The challenge that we have, like I've already indicated, it's around the governance. We need to teach our people governance part of it so that they're able to run those projects on their own. And that will also make sure that we minimize a lot of money that normally goes to middlemen who will be acting on behalf of those communities. Once you have trained local guardians in those projects, you know very well that communities are now on their own. They are now able to negotiate and to manage own projects together with their partners. And in terms of other opportunities for youngsters, we need to arrest the situation now. If you look at the coming Montreal Agreement and you look at the Paris Agreement and the SDGs, they are there to make sure that we create opportunities for our youngsters. But we can only do that if we partner with local governments, assist them in terms of policy developments, because they've signed those agreements. But for them to get to a level where they're able to understand implementation, we as specialists, we need to assist them. That's when they will be able to assist our youngsters in terms of job creation.
And Esther, I would like to ask, what is the greatest lesson that nature has taught you personally?
Okay, that's a very interesting one. Some few months back in our province of KwaZulu-Natal, KZN, there were some huge floods. They even affected the Western Cape province. And as I was watching on the TV, listening to what people are saying in terms of commenting, and some of the buildings are being destroyed, and people are saying, what we need to do is to try and start respecting nature. Because it looks like now we've upset nature and nature is coming for us. Also, the experience that I had with animals. Once you start making sure that you don't respect them, they get angry. You are going to lose a lot of your livestock as a result of the lions, because once they're angry at you, they're angry. They'll just destroy everything. Once elephants are angry, they will destroy all your fields, all your crops. So one thing that I've learned from my side is that once you respect nature, nature respects you, and you both benefit.
You know, this is a really big issue here in Switzerland as well. There's been massive floods in the Alps. Zermatt has been completely flooded, and some people have pointed out that it's ironic that just at the beginning of the season, they were actually digging up the glacier to make artificial snow for the FIS World Cup series because there wasn't enough snow to organize that event. But rather than canceling it, they were actually digging up snow from the glacier. And obviously a lot of environmental groups got outraged and stopped it eventually. But there's a similar kind of, I'm not going to say lack of respect, but probably lack of understanding about how we can harmoniously coexist with wildlife. There's been a lot of effort to bring back wolves in Europe, in the Alps, and other wild animals like beavers, otters, the lynx. And now it succeeded. And even in this canton where I'm living in Valle, there are 11 wolf packs that live here. The problem is there is ongoing conflict with the farmers. And unfortunately, Switzerland and many other EU nations are going in a way where they are authorizing culling of animals even without any previous evidence of that interaction. So I'm wondering where this is going to lead, because it's certainly not the path that you describe of learning to live in coexistence, learning to respect nature. And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on how do you think we could move away from that fear-based existence where we want to control and dominate nature to that more peaceful, mutual, respectful relationship?
You see, it's the way we are bringing up youngsters, the way we are bringing up our kids. They are in the laboratory, the way they are growing up. They are in the laboratory, and that laboratory is in the city. They see what they see, and they think it's real life. They only know what they know, which is just less than half of real life. And we are the ones to blame because we know too much about the coexistence principles that we are supposed to be complying with as humans. So, of course, if we continue to live in a fear to say that it's a lion, it's a wolf, it's an elephant, and it's because it's destroying, this is how we're going to deal with it, we're going to cull it, we're going to kill it, we're just going the opposite direction. The next thing, as we are aware, all these animals are there for a reason from the way the nature was created. There's no any other animal being or human being which is not useful in terms of making sure that our nature thrives. So even the elephants, if we say that elephants are too many, what do we mean? Because also their role is to try and make sure that they manage those trees, because once the trees are too many, we are not going to be able to have enough grass for your buffaloes and all these other animals that eat grass. So we need to understand that nature itself can balance itself without us. Once we start intervening too much, then we are going the opposite direction. So it's all about education, but also when youngsters are growing up, let's also have policies in different local governments to expose these youngsters and to try and educate them to understand how nature can coexist with human beings.
And Esther, do you believe that a love of nature is part of establishing that respect and bringing that existence into balance? Or what do you think we need to do really as next steps to get this balance in place?
I think from the global perspective, I think we're on the right track, as I've already indicated. With all the different agreements, with all the different global policies from the United Nations point of view that are addressing issues of environment, I think the globe has done enough. What is lacking is that we commit as presidents or as nations, but when it gets to the implementation level at local governments, I don't think we're doing enough. And that's where your United Nations, your UNDP, your UNEP, they have to intervene. by now we should have already been developing some policy guidelines. Of course, it will be different from continent to continent, to try and give them some directions, these governments, to start implementing. And that's what is lacking currently.
So, Esther, we have 4 quick questions for you that we're asking all our guests, exactly the same questions. So just 4 very quick final questions. So first of all, what is your favorite place in nature?
My favorite place in nature is deep in the river, where it's not even too close to artificial noise like your sounds of cars or your human voices, where it's quiet, it's natural. The sounds that I would like to hear, it's only being the bird which is trying to remove the fish out of the river, or birds that are just singing. Those are the spots that I like in nature.
And what is one place that you have not yet visited but would really love to?
It's Amazon. I've heard a lot about Amazon, and I believe that it will also grow my spiritual understanding of nature if one day I can be there.
Fantastic. Now, do you have a favorite piece of art, a book, poetry, or a film that really connects you to nature?
Oh yes, a book written by Ian Thomas. I keep on reading it again and again. It's called The Pride of the Lions. I think it's Lion Pride, rather. It's not a very big book, but the message is loaded. And I like it because when he starts writing that book, he started by apologizing that he's not trying to compare lions with human beings. But when you are done with the book, you realize that indeed that's how human beings live, either in their boardrooms or in their families or in our discussions. So I keep on reading that book.
We'll have to read it too.
Yes.
And what is one thing you would recommend for our listeners who want to connect to nature to do?
We need to start listening to our elders when they talk about nature. When they talk about the don'ts and the do's, that's very important. We listen and we have to research more, connect it to today's scientific knowledge, because that's where that scientific knowledge comes from.
I try to take that advice. I call my grandmother every Sunday and I ask her about the farm and try to take note of all her wisdom. So really, I'll keep that practice.
Thank you for being here with us, Esther. It was really interesting conversation and for sharing your wisdom and your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate so much also. It was really interesting and very informative.
Wow, Jessica, that was quite special. There were moments I felt so touched by what she was saying, and especially, this lived sense of connection to nature through her culture, through the ancestors, through spiritual practices where she's able to speak to a tree and a river. I mean, imagine if all of us would have that capability again. And it just reminded me of a time where I learned from a shaman in Scandinavia who was of the same belief that every living being has a spirit that you can talk to. And I mean, it's just amazing that all the ancient traditions were of the same belief and held the same wisdom, and we regularly were able to connect to nature in that deep, visceral sense and get guidance and get insights into our lives. And I'm really wondering if that kind of connection was re-established how different decisions we would make for our future.
Yes, actually, it reminded me, I went to the World Biodiversity Forum recently, and I met someone who specialized in interspecies communication. And actually, they and then some other colleagues I met said this is actually a very established field of how do we communicate between species. So it was one that it hadn't crossed my radar before, but across many, cultures, and different geographies, people have communication with animals. I also really found the angle of communicating with your ancestors and the connection to the lake, extremely powerful. I think people associate Southern Africa and South Africa, Limpopo province, where she lives, with the huge, well-known Kruger Park with wildlife, very much. But her connection was so strongly through water with her ancestors. So really, I thought I was grateful that she shared her perspective with us and with everyone watching. So it was really interesting, and I learned so much.
Yeah, likewise. I wish we could just keep talking to her. We should invite her on walks. I want to go on walks with her and watching the animals in the bushes.
Well, hopefully, Esther, if you're listening to this now, we'd love to be invited. So this has been Executives in the Wild, and our guest today was Esther Netshivhongweni. I'm Jessica Smith.
And I'm Diana Denke. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Executives in the Wild is created by Diana Denke, Jessica Smith, and Robin Agustin. Those involved in the podcast are doing so in a personal capacity, and views expressed are not necessarily associated with their employers. You can follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Executives in the Wild, or go to executivesinthewild.com, where you can sign up to be a part of our community. Please support us by subscribing and sharing this podcast, available on YouTube and most outlets including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you soon.